Happy Halloween, everybody. This is Evan from DMV Sports Zone giving you another update on all things DMV sports. As always, we start with college football and the Maryland Terrapins. You didn't hear too much about Maryland this past week. That's because they were on a bye. So the Terrapins remain at 6-2, 3-2 in the Big Ten. That's good for fourth place in the Eastern Division. Up next for the Terps, they head to Madison to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin comes in at 4-4, 2-3 in the Big Ten. That's good for fourth in the Western Division. The Badgers, like the Terps, are also coming off a bye. So these will be two well-rested teams going head-to-head in Madison. Up next, let's talk about the Navy midshipmen. So for Navy, it certainly was a battle in Annapolis, but they ultimately came out on top, 27-20 in overtime over Temple, thanks to a 23-yard game-winning touchdown in overtime by Xavier Arline. The win improves the midshipmen to 3-5, 3-3 in the American Athletic Conference. That's good for sixth place in the conference standings. Up next for the Mids, they head to Cincinnati to take on the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati comes in at 6-2, 3-1 in the American Athletic Conference. That's good for third place. The Bearcats are coming off a 25-21 loss at UCF last week on a 17-yard touchdown run by R.J. Harvey with 48 seconds left. Up next, let's talk about the Virginia Cavaliers. So for Virginia, like Navy, it was also a hard-fought battle, but unlike Navy, the Cavaliers weren't exactly lucky enough to come out on top, falling 14-12 in triple overtime to Miami in a game in which they did not allow a single touchdown. The loss drops the Cavaliers to 3-5, 1-4 in the ACC. That's good for sixth place in the Coastal Division ahead of only Virginia Tech, who we'll talk about later. But up next for the Wahoos, they return home to host the North Carolina Tar Heels. North Carolina comes in at 7-1, 4-0 in the ACC. That's good for first place in the Coastal Division. And the Tar Heels are coming off a 42-24 win over Pitt. And we're going to wrap up the college football segment by talking about the Virginia Tech Hokies. So for Virginia Tech, like the first two, it was another hard-fought battle, but they ultimately could not hold their lead, falling 22-21 on the road at number 24 NC State. The loss drops the Hokies to 2-6 on the season, 1-4 in the ACC. That's good for seventh place, last place in the Coastal Division, and Virginia Tech is now one loss away from being eliminated from bowl contention. The Hokies will try to stave off elimination this week when they return home to host the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech comes in at 3-5, 2-3 in the ACC. That's good for fourth place in the Coastal Division. The Yellow Jackets are coming off a humbling 41-16 loss at Florida State, where the Seminoles scored 24 unanswered points. Prior to that, Georgia Tech had a 3-0 lead. And now we transition to hockey and talk about the team on my shirt, the Washington Capitals. So for the Caps, the week ended with a strong finish, a 3-0 shutout win in Nashville on Saturday, the first shutout win of the season for Washington. The Caps improved to 5-4. That's good for 10 points. They're tied with the Islanders for fifth place in the Metropolitan Division. So here's the week ahead for Washington. For the Capitals, the week begins tonight as the month concludes, and so does the road trip as they head to Raleigh to take on the Carolina Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are coming in at 5-2-1. That's good for 11 points. They're tied with Philadelphia for third place in the Metropolitan Division. Carolina's coming off a 4-3 overtime win in Philadelphia on Saturday thanks to a game-winning goal in overtime by Brett Burns. This is the first of three between the Caps and the Canes. Last season, Washington took 3 out of 4 against Carolina. The Capitals, the month of November begins on Tuesday when they return home to host the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights are currently 8-2. That's good for 16 points and first place in the Pacific Division. Vegas is coming off a 2-1 overtime win over the Jets on Sunday. They've won 4 in a row. This is the first of 2 between the Caps and the Knights. Last season, Vegas swept the season series against Washington. On Thursday, the Capitals head to Detroit to take on the Red Wings. The Red Wings are currently 4-2-2. That's good for 10 points. They're tied with Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Montreal, and Toronto for third place in the Atlantic Division. Detroit is coming off a 2-1 win over the Wild on Saturday thanks to a game-winning goal by Lucas Raymond with 5 seconds left in the second period. So this is the first of 3 between the Caps and the Wings. Last season, Washington took 2 out of 3 against Detroit. And for the Capitals, the week concludes on Saturday when they host the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are currently 2-5-1. That's good for 5 points and last place in the Central Division. Arizona's coming off a 3-2 loss to the Rangers on Sunday. They've lost 2 in a row. This is the first of 2 between the Caps and the Yotes. Last season, Washington swept the season series against Arizona. And we're going to round out the DMV Sports Update by talking about the Washington Wizards. So for the Wizards, the first week was a good one. This past week, not so much, being capped off with a 112-94 loss in Boston on Sunday. They've now lost 2 in a row. So this loss drops the Wizards to 3-3. They're tied with New York, Toronto, and Charlotte for 5th place in the Eastern Conference. Here's the week ahead for Washington. For the Wizards, the month of October concludes tonight when they return home to host the Philadelphia 76ers. The 76ers come in at 3-4. They're tied with Chicago and Indiana for 9th place in the Eastern Conference. Philadelphia is coming off a 114-109 win in Chicago on Saturday. They've won 2 in a row. This is the first of 4 between the Wiz and the Sixers. Last season, Washington took 2 out of 3 against Philadelphia. For the Wizards, the month of November begins on Wednesday when they head to Philadelphia to take on these same 76ers. The same information I just said still applies here, so no need to elaborate. Let's just go to the next one. On Friday, the Wizards return home to host the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are currently 1-5. That's good for 14th place in the East, ahead of only Orlando. Brooklyn's coming off a 125-119 loss against the Pacers on Saturday. They've lost 4 in a row, and they are just in an absolute disarray. This is the first of 4 between the Wiz and the Nets. Last season, Washington and Brooklyn split 4 games. And for the Wizards, the week concludes on Sunday when they head to Memphis to take on the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are currently 4-2. That's good for a tie for 5th place in the Western Conference with New Orleans. Memphis is coming off a 124-123 loss in Utah on Saturday. Thanks to balanced scoring by the Jazz, Lauri Markkanen was their leading scorer with 23 points. This is the first of 2 between the Wiz and the Grizz. Last season, Washington and Memphis split a pair of games, with the home team winning both. And that'll do it for this update. Stay tuned. We've got plenty of good content from myself. Expect a trade deadline video for the Commanders tomorrow. Also good content from Noah, Naji, and Abdullah as they cover our Commanders and their big game this week against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. Until next time, I'm Evan from DMV Sports Zone, signing off.